there were 14 of our choir members, 7 children, 7 adults, that tested positive. And we accounted at one point for 50% of the COVID cases in Uganda. Watoto. And the president was upset. He got on national TV and he came at Watoto. He was mad. I was like, these children, why are they out? This Watoto, we need to investigate them. And I realized that what was going on at that point was actually very fear-driven. He was so afraid, and that spirit of fear began to spread in the country. And I remember when that happened, I was also gripped by fear. Because all of a sudden, the media houses wanted to know about Watoto. And then some of our enemies, got up and said, oh yeah, this is the opportunity to bring down Watoto. And I tell you, Vanita knows, the media people that came home, because we couldn't move. The media people were allowed to move. We had a BBC reporter come and ask me if I spoke Swahili. I said I don't speak Swahili because they wanted to do a look. And I mean, it was crazy, but a lot of it driven by the spirit of fear. My friends, if there's anything that Satan wants to do, Satan wants to steal, kill, and destroy you. And one way he does it is by using fear. So I want to talk to you today, very briefly, about overcoming that spirit of fear. And I know as I speak today, some of you are gripped by fear that has kept you from becoming everything God has called you to do. It's a terrible spirit. And when I think on this subject of fear, I think about how Paul was caring for his spiritual son, Timothy, deeply loved Timothy. But Paul had seen something that would destroy Timothy's life. And so he wrote a letter. By the way, when you're reading the Bible and reading the letters, so those of you who have written letters, you make sure you are very specific in what you want to say. You don't have the luxury of writing all kinds of things. You're intentional. These days, even on our modern ways of communicating, some communication modes have limited words. So you can't go beyond certain words. You must pick your words carefully. And when Paul was writing to Timothy, he had to pick his words carefully because he just never knew if this would be the last letter he would write. And here, Paul writes to Timothy, 2 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 3 to 7. I just love it. He says, I thank God whom I serve with a pure conscience, as my forefathers did. As without ceasing, I remember you in my prayers night and day. Make sure you're here for Wednesday prayer times. It's good to pray. Greatly desiring to see you. Man, you can see how a spiritual father desires to connect with his spiritual son. Being mindful of your tears, that I may be filled with joy. Paul was also thankful, and he says, when I call to remembrance the genuine faith that is in you, which dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded is in you also. Therefore, I remind you to stir up the gift of God which is in you through the laying on of my hands. All of us have the gift of God in us. And Paul is saying, I want to remind you. Yes, there's faith in the generations before, but Timothy, there's a gift in you. You're a leader. And I know, Paul says, I laid hands on you and I saw that gift in you. I called it out. And I want to remind you to stir up the gift of God which is in you through the laying on of my hands. And verse 7, he says, for God has not given us a spirit of fear. What had Paul seen? Paul had seen a spirit of fear trying to stop the gift of God in Timothy. And Timothy was a timid, shy guy, but he was gripped by this spirit of fear. And so he reminds him the spirit of fear is not from God. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but instead of power and of love and of a sound mind. So we must never entertain the spirit of fear. It's not from God. It's not from God. And I believe what Paul is telling Timothy here is to understand that we must reject this spirit of fear and embrace what God has given to us. Spirit of power, spirit of love, and of a sound mind. And that's how we're going to overcome fear, by embracing those three things. And I just want to go through them very quickly. Reject fear, and don't just stop at rejecting fear. Receive spirit-assured love. You know, Jesus once talked about when an evil spirit is cast out of a person. If they do not fill up that place with God's truth, what happens is that spirit is going to come back. And if it finds nothing there, it's going to get 7 stronger demons. Remember that? So it's not just enough to reject the spirit of fear. You got to receive something so that it never, ever affects your life again. So here we reject fear, and then Paul says you got to receive what God gives to us, and that is the spirit of love, spirit-assured love. And, you know, I love how Paul is also very specific. Why love? I'm going to start with love. And this is why. The spirit of fear tends to make us feel, you know, we're not accepted, we're not loved. Anytime you start to feel like, am I really accepted in this place? That's the voice of the spirit of fear. Am I really loved in this place? Does God really love me?
If you enjoyed this video today, why don't you click subscribe and click on that notification bell to get a notification the next time we upload a video. And if you're new or you've been coming to the C3 Church for a little while now, why don't you find out what your next step might be in the journey of faith? Click on the next step link in the description below to find out what your next step in your journey might be.